Hello friends, how are you doing? I hope you're doing fine. It has been 2 days since we did the last video, but today with me, I have this video discussing on the education levels. The education levels as you're supposed to fill in the DS260 form. We have about 3 days and 21 hours before the release of the DV 2025 results, and I hope you're preparing, you're warming up towards the DS260 form, because when you get selected, the next step is filling this form, and that's why we are doing these videos, that we may acquaint you with the information in the DS260 form. And today we are discussing the levels of education. But I want to make these important points about the education levels. So you are supposed to list all the levels that you have attained so far, beginning with the highest and then downwards to the lowest. And especially if you have anything above the secondary education, you need to list them here. But there's another thing that you should know. You will list only those courses that you have been through completely. That is, you have finished those levels. In other words, you have the diplomas, the certificates for that course. If you have not the certificates, you cannot fill those levels, because you will need the certificates as document proofs during the interview. So if you are halfway through a course, you cannot list that here because you don't have the certification. But on that same note, remember that there are courses that as you get them, you will have already obtained their certificates before you go for your interview, depending on your case number. If you are able to calculate when you can get your certificate, and that would be before the interview, that is your interview appointment, then that education, you can list it here. The point is, the education that you list, you must have the supporting document. That is the proof document, that is the certificate or the diploma to that course. I hope that point is clear. So list all the education whose certificates you have. And if you know you can complete the course before the start of the interviews, or before you go to the interview and get your certificate, then list it here as well. I have spoken a lot that you may understand. Another point that I want to make is, while filling the DS260 form on that section of education, remember to be as simple as possible. And I repeat, if you don't have a supporting document to that level, don't list it here. Remember, the diversity visa approval is not dependent on the level of education. So long as you have the least level that is required, that is the high school diploma, all the others above that do not add any weight. It does not add any advantage that you get approved. So it just be simple. I've had friends who were continuing with their university courses, but since they were not through, they filled their high school certificates and they just simplified the information. They just put the high school diploma, as simple as that, and went with the certificate, and they are now in the United States. So don't complicate things. The point is, you should minimize as much as you can the documents that you need for proof during the interview. Just use the relevant information that you have. If you don't have a certificate, don't list that education level. Just be simple, and your interview will be simple and straightforward, and you'll get successful. Another point to note is that On the secondary education, we have the junior secondary and we have the senior secondary in some countries' education system. Some countries, they have the O-level system and the A-level system. And when you look at those systems, the O-level, they go up to 10 years, and then you're given a certificate. That is for the junior secondary. And then you need to proceed to the senior secondary, that is up to grade 12. And then you're given the certificate. And I told you, once you reach that grade 12, the certificate that you get after the secondary education, after the 12th year, the grade 12, that is the equivalent of the US high school diploma. That is what you qualify with. You don't qualify with the junior secondary certificate. That is the O level in those countries. So when you are listing your education, the O level is considered as a certificate by itself. That is the level. And then you go to the senior secondary, you list that as well, because you'll have to list the start year and the end year of that. So if you have those two certificates, consider them as separate certificates when filling the DS260 form. And this is the section where you fill your education level. It is still under the previous work, education and training information. And you're told, have you attended any educational institutions at a secondary level or above? So if you have certificate above secondary or at the secondary level, then you select yes. So if you have the high school diploma, you click yes. If you have a degree, that is an education above the secondary education, A level in some countries, then you click yes. If you have not any certificate above the 12th grade, the A level, if you have anything lower than that, you say no. And then if it is yes, the number of certificates that you have, you will have to fill here. In other words, the number of higher institutions that you have attended to, you list them here. If it is 2, say 2. If it's 3, say 3. So if you have a university degree that is undergraduate and you have a master's, you will list here as 3. That is the high school diploma, the undergraduate, and the master's. So you count from the high school diploma the number of courses that you've attained or achieved, and you have the certificates, then you list them here. And then you shall go filling in the information one after the other and start with the highest one. So you fill the name, the address, the streets, the city, the province, the country, the course of study, all those you fill. And then all the way up to this, the date you started, that is important, and the date you completed your course. And that's why I told you, if you're still continuing, you don't have an end date. The end date is not yet, you've not reached. That's why it will be just of complication. Just list the certificates that you have completed. So that's it for today. I think, guys, you've learned a lot. And if you have any more questions regarding the education levels or anything else that we discussed before regarding the DS260 form, please don't forget to ask it on the comment section. And whenever I have time, I usually come and answer those comments. And please subscribe to the channel. I've realized 42% of you viewing have not subscribed. And also, if you are new, please consider subscribing. Push the bell on, like the video, share with your friends, and let's meet in the next video.